The Phantom Carriage. In the beginning of the 19th century, Durango was still a small city, with the furthest ranch being at least 30 miles away. This caused a problem for the local priest who provided services to the people that lived outside of the city. The priest, now in his 70s, was a man of great virtue. He had dedicated his whole life to serve his parish and God with great dedication. As the priest was getting too old to perform his missionary work, the bishop knew that he would need to be retired soon and would only perform his duties in the local church. Soon a decision was made and they brought in Father Benjamin. Benjamin was a young priest who had just been ordained. In the seminary, he had shown humility, devotion to the life of a priest, and dedication to God. For this, he was rewarded as heir to the parish of the old priest. As time passed, Benjamin earned the trust of the priest and they became good friends. When performing his duties, Benjamin would be up at 5 in the morning to celebrate morning mass. Then he would study the Bible with the priest during the day, and in the afternoons he would set out to provide services to the people in the farms. His missionary work made him cover great distances. His only protection was his faith and his position as a priest. Every day he did this and would arrive back at the church late at night. One day in the month of May, it was late in the afternoon and he arrived at a small ranch. He proceeded to knock and ask for some water as he had been walking for a while and was very thirsty. An older man opened the door and was surprised at his presence. The owner of the ranch let him in and offered a chair and some drink. The gentleman soon ordered his daughter Angelica to fetch some water for Benjamin. Angelica was a beautiful 18-year-old girl with light brown skin, black eyes, and long black hair that had grown down to her waist. As the girl kneeled by the priest and gave him water, she touched hands with him and locked eyes. Benjamin felt an electric charge as this happened that shook him from head to toe. He drank his water quickly, and as he returned the cup to her, he held her hand and kissed her on the cheek and said, "God bless this home." He said his goodbyes to her father and left quickly. Benjamin hurried back to his home with the rosary in hand. That night he could not sleep, as the thought of Angelica ran through his mind the entire time. He was mortified from the temptation that had occurred, so he got up in the middle of the night and used the lash to flagellate himself until blood was drawn. He cried that night and condemned the moment of his weakness. He swore to himself and to God that it would never happen again, and he would never pass by that home ever again. Many weeks passed, and that moment in his life became a faded memory. One morning in the month of August, he was passing through the atrium of the temple after his morning prayers. He heard footsteps behind him, and as he turned, the gaze of the young girl met his eyes. She was more beautiful than the first time he had laid eyes upon her. She said good morning to him, and at the same time gave him a basket of fruits as a present. Benjamin was speechless. He did not know what to do. For a few seconds he had forgotten about the sin of temptation, and he felt like holding her in his arms. She stood there smiling at him, and he returned to his senses. He needed to be respectful and give out his hand and blessed her for her gift. She began to leave but smiled as her gaze fell on him, and with a look Angelica declared her feelings. She had not even left the church when he rushed into the main temple. Benjamin collapsed in front of the crucified Jesus and wept. He asked if he was being tested, then prayed for strength, for he did not want to fall into temptation. That night, Benjamin once again punished himself. He prayed, fasted, flagellated, and would walk barefoot many miles to show his conviction and dedication to the church. He even thought about transferring to another parish, but soon gave up that notion, as he did not want to abandon the old priest who would not be able to resume the missionary work. A few weeks passed and there was a celebration at one of the haciendas. Benjamin was requested to perform mass and bless the occasion. The people did singing, and in the crowd he heard the most angelic voice. As he searched the crowd, he saw Angelica. She looked even more beautiful than before. Once mass ended, she stayed around to greet him and once again delivered a look of love. Benjamin met her gaze and desired to hold her, but he regained his composure and soon she departed. He stayed there for some time and asked God for forgiveness, and he prayed. The owners, noticing he was still there, asked him to stay and have breakfast in the morning, but he declined. This was a perfect opportunity for Benjamin to walk back barefoot and atone for his weakness. Benjamin had walked a couple of miles during his penance when Angelica stepped out from behind a mesquite tree. Thinking that he would be given a ride home by carriage, she had decided to wait there and see him pass by. Being alone together, she could not contain herself. Angelica wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply. Benjamin, not fighting his feelings, returned the embrace, passionately kissing her. On that night, Angelica would become a woman, and Benjamin would break his promise of celibacy to the church. As it was getting later in the night, he walked her close to her home and kissed her goodbye. She walked away and he watched her disappear into the night. Time passed and Benjamin was alone again. He started feeling remorse and felt like a disgrace. He couldn't even cry anymore. He felt ashamed of being a priest and condemned his humanity. He did not know what to do. He thought about locking himself away in the monastery, becoming a friar, and never seeing Angelica again. His other option would be leaving the church and become a common man so that he could be with his lover. He stood on the side of the road and thought deeply and decided he was not worthy of being a priest, so he decided to leave the church. In that moment, he heard a carriage in the distance. As it neared, he saw two mules pulling a cart being driven by a farmer he had seen earlier that night. Benjamin thought about stopping the man and asking to borrow his cart. Then he could quickly get to town, confess, and leave the church behind. Sure enough, he waved the man down. The farmer, who recognized Benjamin, gave him the reins and delivered a blessing for his ride home. Hearing these words of praise hurt Benjamin deeply, as he was not worthy as a failed priest. Benjamin, distressed, rode on. He hit the reins hard and raced towards town. He could not wait until he arrived. There he would confess his sins and quit his old life. As he flew down the road, his mind was consumed by guilt, by the thought of how he had failed his faith and his God. As he raced, the carriage rocked and bounced on the road. The wind blew fast, and the noise of the mules on the rocky road sounded like a distant thunder, delivering an unwanted storm. As the cart was nearing town, there was a turn, and Benjamin, not paying attention, lost his balance. He tumbled backwards and fell out, with his foot getting caught in a chain. Benjamin, hanging from the back, met his fate in that moment. As the carriage rode fast down the rocky road, it dragged him away, tearing his body apart. The mules reached the church on their own, as if led by a phantom rider. All that was left of Benjamin was a bloody mess. The constant dragging on the rocky ground had left his head and body mangled. He was unrecognizable, only identified by the clothing that was left and the rosary in his pocket. It is said that on a dark night on the same road he perished. Sometimes you can hear the carriage thundering towards you, dragging Benjamin behind. Thank you for listening to today's story. Please don't forget to share, subscribe, and hit the like button. If you would like to contribute your own encounter or story, please contact me at the email below. Thank you, and keep an open mind, for there are things out there that are yet to be understood.